Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March edition of Facebook Live here at Jumpstart. I'm Colleen Tressler, a Senior Project Manager at the Federal Trade Commission, and I'm guest hosting for Laura Levine this afternoon, who's out on travel. I'd like to welcome everyone who's tuning in now, as well as those of you who will be watching later today. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with my colleague, Lisa Schifferle. Lisa is an attorney in the Division of Consumer and Business Education. Lisa has led trainings on identity theft, scams, and cybersecurity. She has also litigated cases dealing with data security, privacy, and fraud cases. Lisa has been with the agency for a little over 10 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with her for the last 4. And combined, we have nearly 40 years of experience litigating for and educating American consumers. As you know, this month's principle is consumer protection and identity theft. So Lisa and I thought we would get the ball rolling by talking about some recent information compiled by the FTC dealing with our Consumer Sentinel data book. So Lisa, since the FTC has released this data, can you tell us some of the trends that we're seeing?
Sure, thanks Colleen. So the biggest trend is that in 2018, for the first time, imposter scams are the #1 complaint that we're getting at the FTC. So if you look here, you'll see that imposter scams has now beaten out debt collection and identity theft complaints to be the #1 type of report that we get at the FTC. And what we're talking about when we mention imposter scams is basically when you get a call and it's someone pretending to be someone you trust, maybe your bank, maybe a family member, maybe a government agency. And the common thread is then they ask for your personal information or they ask you to send money. And usually they'll ask for that money by wire transfer or by prepaid card or gift card. So those are big red flags for these imposter scams that we're talking about.
Okay, and can we break down the trends a little bit more as far as numbers?
Sure. Well, the other thing that our data book shows is that 1 in 5 people are actually reporting that they've lost money to these imposter scams. So the nice thing about that data is it suggests that people are recognizing these imposter scams before they lose money to them. So only 1 in 5 people are actually losing money to the imposter scams, but still it is the #1 complaint, and that's a lot of people losing money to these imposter scams.
Okay, and so we know that there are a lot of different types. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the more common imposter scams?
Well, this year what we learned is that government imposters make up about half of the imposter scams, and the 2 big ones are the Social Security imposter and the Irs imposter. So Social Security imposters have really skyrocketed. In 2017, we had only about 3,000 reports of people who've gotten these Social Security imposter calls. But if you look from the start of 2018 until today, we have over 63,000 reports of these calls. So that's almost 30 times as many. And the dollar loss has gone up too, from about 210,000 in 2017 to over 16 million since the start of 2018. And what we're talking about with these Social Security imposters is when someone calls and says they're from Social Security, and then they'll say there's a problem with your Social Security number. Maybe they say it was involved in illegal activity, or it's been suspended, or sometimes it's a good thing. They say you're going to get more benefits, but you need to give them your Social Security number. And really, they're trying to get your personal information for identity theft. So that's the Social Security imposter call. The other big one we're seeing are the Irs imposters, and this has been a trend for a number of years now. This is where people call and say they're from the IRS, and they say that you owe a past tax debt, and sometimes they threaten to arrest you or to deport you. And again, they'll ask for your personal information, or they'll ask you to send money to them to pay this supposed tax debt. And they'll ask for it by wire transfer or a prepaid card or gift card. Again, red flags that it's an imposter calling and not the real IRS. The last imposter scam that I just want to mention is the romance scam. That's a different twist than the government imposters. And basically what's happening there is someone's cultivating an online relationship, and then after they cultivate that relationship, they start asking for money. Maybe it's because they say they need surgery, or maybe they need a plane ticket to see you. But the common thread is then they're asking you for money, and these are big dollar loss scams. We've seen the romance scams really skyrocket in terms of the number of reports we're getting of them, and also it's the highest dollar loss scam that we're hearing about right now. The median loss is $2,600 for people who are reporting that they're affected by these romance scams.
Right, and this particular scam, the romance scams, has gotten a little bit more sophisticated. What we've been seeing at the FTC is some of the scammers are trying to increase their credibility, and what they do is they want to send a gift to their target, whether it be flowers or a gift card, something like that, to make it appear more legitimate, right?
Right, definitely. The scammers are getting more sophisticated as people are learning about the scams, so they're upping the ante and giving you a little something first before they ask for your money sometimes.
Right. So now, what does the data show about how the scammers are contacting people, and there again, how they're asking the people to pay?
Well, the interesting thing, and this may be surprising to some people, is that scammers are still using the phone as the main method of contact for people that reported scams to us. It's actually 69% of people who indicated how they were contacted said they were contacted by phone. The other interesting part is in terms of payment methods, it's still the wire transfer that's the most prevalent way that scammers are asking for money. They are also now increasingly using gift cards and asking for payment on prepaid cards, but still wire transfer and phone are the main methods and standbys of scammers, so those are big red flags for people to look out for.
And for the most part, those payment methods, once the money is gone, it's gone.
Absolutely, that's why the scammers like them.
Right. So what can you tell us about the reports showing about age and fraud loss? And we have a lot of educators on the line. We probably have some interest in how frauds affect young people.
Right. Well, another interesting statistic that we learned from our Consumer Sentinel data book of all the complaints that the FTC has gotten about all sorts of different types of scams is that younger people are reporting losing money to scams more than older people. So if you look here, 43% of people in their 20s who report a scam say they've lost money, as opposed to 15% of people in their 70s. But if you look at how much money they lost, the other interesting part is that people in their 20s are losing less on average. It's $400 median loss, as opposed to people in their 80s here. You see it's $1,700 as a median loss. So younger people are more likely to report losing money to a fraud, but they're losing less. So it's important for all of us who work with younger people or older people to understand these trends.
Right. And so we've talked a lot about these scammers wanting personal information, so that's a nice segue to getting into the issue of identity theft. So what did Consumer Sentinel, what does the report show for 2018?
Well, what we're seeing changing is that tax identity theft is going way down, and new account or new credit card accounts are going way up. So tax identity theft is when someone will take your social security number and try to get a refund using that. So that's going down, and instead what we see going up is people using your social security number and other personal information to open new accounts.
Okay. So we've talked about scams, we've talked about some of the data out of Consumer Sentinel. We know, because we work on education, that we have a whole library of material. So let's talk a little bit about our outreach efforts, how the FTC goes about informing and educating people in scams and identity theft in particular.
Right. Well, in addition to doing things like this Facebook Live that we're on, we do a lot of webinars, we go to conferences, we do presentations in person, and then we have a lot of materials online and in print. So for identity theft in particular, a great online resource we have is identitytheft.gov, and what that does is it allows people to report identity theft, and they get a personalized recovery plan that walks them through the steps to take for 32 different types or over 30 types of identity theft. It will tell you exactly what you need to do for your particular situation, including child identity theft. So this is a great resource to know about. We also have print materials for identity theft and for a lot of other topics. But just to give you an idea, with ID theft, we have a general one, child, military, and a data breach one, as well as a recovery plan, which is designed for people who are victims of identity theft. So all of these materials are available in English and in Spanish, and that identitytheft.gov site is also available in Spanish as well. They can be ordered for free in bulk at ftc.gov/bulk order. So we really encourage people to order them, hand them out in their classrooms, and use them in their communities.
Great. And so since we're coming to you today from Jumpstart headquarters, do we have materials that are geared specifically towards teachers?
Absolutely. Well, one of the great tools we have for educators is our consumer.gov Educator Sample Pack. This is it here. This can also be ordered at ftc.gov/bulk order. And what you'll see inside when you open it are a bunch of sheets like this, including a make a budget worksheet, which allows people to calculate their income and expenses and see how their budget is working out. And then a variety of different topical sheets like managing debt. It covers topics including managing money, like how to buy a used car, how to rent an apartment, and then also things about credit and debt, like how do you get new credit if you're just a young person starting out? What do you do to repair your credit? And what do you do if you're in a lot of debt? And then there's also a series of materials on scams and identity theft like we're talking about today. And one of the really nice things about the consumer.gov materials for educators is they also have lesson plans. So for each of these topics, they'll give you a lesson that you can use with your students in order to teach these topics. So again, you can either go to consumer.gov or to ftc.gov/bulk order to get these materials for your classrooms.
Right, and in addition to getting them for your classrooms, this would be a popular item to share at PTA meetings, other school events.
Absolutely. They're great for PTA. They're great if you're out in the community, in the libraries, anywhere you go. These are a great resource for people. There also are online audio read-alongs. So we hear that a lot of English as a second language teachers particularly like the consumer.gov materials, but they're great for anyone who's teaching these topics.
Right, and just to repeat, everything that we do in English is also done in Spanish. Everything we do is free of charge. So let's talk a little bit about some of the FTC's top tips for avoiding scams, especially the imposter scams we talked about earlier.
Well, the big things to remember about the imposter scams are just picking up on a lot of the trends that we discussed. So that if you get a call from someone out of the blue claiming to be from the government and asking for your personal information or for money, then hang up. The government's not going to threaten you. They're not going to use that kind of tone that you're going to be deported or arrested. They're not going to ask for money by a specific payment method like wire transfer or prepaid card. So really people should be very, very skeptical if they get any sort of call that asks for personal information or money. They should just hang up and call back at the number that they know to be correct for whoever it is that is supposedly calling them, because you can't trust caller ID anymore as the other complicating factor. So even if it looks like the IRS or Social Security is calling you, or maybe even your grandchild, you can't trust that caller ID because the scammers are spoofing those numbers, and they can call from anywhere in the world and make it look like they're calling from somewhere else. So really you need to hang up and call back at a number you know to be correct before you give any personal information or any money. And also please do report these scams to the FTC at ftc.gov/complaint, because with those reports we can not only tell trends to people like you all listening, but we can also target our law enforcement efforts to try to stop these scams.
Right, and one thing I want to mention is there are a variety of these imposter scams, as Lisa said. So what we've done is create a special page on the FTC site, and it's ftc.gov/imposters. So talking a little bit more about scams and identity theft, what are some of the FTC's tips for reducing the likelihood of identity theft?
Well, for identity theft, I like to say protect what you have and be careful what you share. So when I say protect what you have, what I'm talking about is practicing basic online safety, things like antivirus and anti-malware software, not using public Wi-Fi for financial transactions or other personal information, because when you're using public Wi-Fi, it's very easy to hack into that. Protect also paper files that you have by keeping them locked and secured, and don't carry around things like your Social Security card with you when you're walking around. And then in terms of be careful what you share, the main thing is to protect that social security number, because that's what people are using to perpetrate tax ID theft. That's what they need to open new accounts in your name. So really, the fewer places you give your social security number to, the better, because that's fewer places it can be lost or breached from. So really try to protect that social security number. And also at this time of year when people are doing taxes, it's important to remember, in terms of reducing tax ID theft, to know your tax preparer, not to go to some fly-by-night tax preparer. There are places that set up shop just to take your personal information this time of year and to commit tax ID theft. And to try to file your taxes early if you can, because that way you beat the thief to the punch and you get your refund, and they're the ones that get a notice from the IRS saying there's already a refund under this social security number, so you don't get it.
So one of the other things we talk about are consumer alerts and credit freezes. Can you explain a little bit more about how they work and when you might want to get one, and also, should you freeze a child's credit?
Right, very good questions, and especially with a new law that went into effect last September, these are good things to know about. Based on that new law, a fraud alert now lasts a year instead of, it used to be 90 days. So what you do with a fraud alert is you can contact any one of the 3 major credit reporting agencies, that's Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion, and the one you contact will contact the other 2. And what it means when you have that fraud alert on is that they're supposed to contact you before they extend any new credit. So if somebody is at a big box store trying to open up a new account, they should call you and say, Colleen, is that you here trying to open the new credit card? And you'll say no, and that should make the fraud alert work. And that will last for a year, and you can renew it after that year to make it last longer. The other alternative is the credit freeze that you mentioned. And the credit freeze now under the new law, the nice thing about it for consumers is it's now free nationwide. It used to vary depending on your state, depending on state law, but now this is a new federal law that took effect in September that makes credit freezes free for anyone in the country. It also makes credit freezes free for children. So you asked about the child credit freeze as well, and so there are new rights for children as well to get that free freeze. And what the freeze does is it restricts access to credit, and it restricts it not only for other people, but also for you, yourself. So if you are about to take out new credit, you may want to think about whether you want that freeze on, because then you'll have to lift it and refreeze it each time. And for the credit freeze, you have to contact each of the 3 credit reporting agencies individually each time you lift and each time you replace the freeze. But it is free each time. Now for children, since you asked about children, the child credit freeze, that may make more sense because a child's not going to need access to credit until maybe they start getting student loans or a car loan, till their later childhood. So some people like to freeze their child's credit so it can't be misused, and then to look into things around age 16 and see if that's when they want to lift their child's credit freeze, so they can access student loans and other types of loans for the child.
Great. So as far as identity theft and dealing with a case where a child might be a victim as opposed to an adult, are they treated differently?
That's a great question, because it is different for children. They do have access for the credit freeze, which is similar, but it's different in terms of prevention, because when you check a credit report for an adult, we should have a credit report because we do have legitimate credit. For a child, if you look for the credit report and you find one, then most likely that means they're a victim of ID theft because someone else has opened accounts in their name. So that's a difference in terms of prevention. The other difference is in terms of remedying the ID theft, because for a child, they can just show that they're a child. And so under the law, as a child, you don't have capacity to contract. So you can't legally incur debts in your name as a child. So once you show you're a child, usually by showing a birth certificate or adoption certificate, then the credit reporting agencies and creditors should take that debt off the child's record. It's more complicated for adults because we have to show that it was somebody else using our credit, not us. Children just have to show I'm a child, so it couldn't possibly be me.
But as far as identitytheft.gov, we have resources for both adults and for children.
Definitely. IdentityTheft.gov is a great resource for anyone who's an identity theft victim, regardless of whether they're an adult or child, and whether it's tax ID theft or medical ID theft or credit card ID theft. It'll give you tailored advice for your particular situation. It also has all those credit bureau contacts. If you want to place a fraud alert or credit freeze, you can go to identitytheft.gov/credit bureau contacts in order to find out how to contact Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion.
Right. So in addition to all the materials we've talked about here today, we also have a consumer blog and we do consumer alerts. So if you really want to stay on top of what's happening in the marketplace, dealing with scams and frauds or just other issues, what's the best way to get that information?
Right, well, like you're suggesting, the best way to do is to sign up for our blogs. People can do that at ftc.gov/subscribe. That's ftc.gov/subscribe. And there you can sign up to get our consumer alerts. And every time we put out a blog, you'll hear about it. And so that way you'll keep on top of what are the latest scams and trends. So when we heard about the Social Security imposter, for instance, we put out blogs about that. So it's a great way to keep on top of the latest and what's going on.
Right, and we use social media. So whenever you see a blog that you think somebody else might be interested in, please share it that way as well. So Lisa, this has been great chatting with you. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close out this session for today?
Well, just to recap, if you get a call from someone claiming to be from the government or any other type of imposter scam call, which you can probably recognize now that you've listened to this, hang up and report it to the FTC at ftc.gov/complaint. And if you're a victim of identity theft, visit identitytheft.gov. And also, if you're wondering and you get one of these Social Security imposter calls, we have a special site set up on identitytheft.gov called identitytheft.gov/SSA, which will tell you how to recognize these Social Security imposter calls and what to do if you gave your Social Security number over one of these calls. Finally, just to recap, if people want more information to share in their communities, in their schools, in their libraries, please visit ftc.gov/bulk order to get free publications in English and in Spanish. All the shipping's free too, so we hope that you'll use these great materials and get them out in the communities.
Great, thanks Lisa. And I hope everybody found this information helpful. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in today. Laura will be back next month for the April principle being Understanding Your Taxes. So until then, thanks for joining us today and have a great afternoon and evening.